I'm Janet, and we're going to lead a Zoom chat on data and assessment in the virtual world. My name is Janet Steinberg. I do data and assessment and literacy and everything no one else wants to do at the project. I'm working with Dave Keck, who also is a data person, and Dr. Paul Bloomberg, who's the Core Collaborative Learning Network director. Um, we're going to take you through different ways to do data. Dave's going to start when he talks about the mood meter. Dave, you ready?
Yep, I think so. So we're kicking off our data and assessment bit by taking a sort of a step to the left a little bit. And I guess saying that the kinds of things that we're interested in knowing about the kids, there's more than just what the kid knows. And as teachers, we use a lot of different data, day to day, to decide whether conditions are right for the kids to learn and to see how things are going and all of that stuff. All of that can feel a little bit more tricky and less intuitive online. It's as though we're looking through a narrower little window sometimes. Now, Mark Brackett is the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and he's been out to the project a number of times. And he's kind of a big, strong voice in talking about the role of emotions in education and how pivotal it is that kids are aware of what's going on with themselves, adults are aware of what's going on with themselves, and that kind of foundation, that environment of the emotional world is taken into consideration. Janet mentioned the mood meter, and you can dig around for that. I actually downloaded the app. They now have an app, and basically it's just looking at the range of human emotions by how pleasant they are and by how much energy they involve. So you can go from like a high energy, high positivity state like ecstasy, all the way down to despair at the bottom end where things are most unpleasant and most low energy. And then high energy, like, being furiously angry, all the way down to serenity, the kind of low energy, peaceful, happy phase. So there's all of that stuff there. And it's kind of fun. If you see a school that's working with that stuff, you watch kids who have a little bit more in the bag when it comes to deciding how they really feel and what to do about it. So I guess this is mostly a reminder that all that stuff that we do in a regular classroom is like every bit as important now as it is when you're online. And in this strange time, it's especially important to stop and observe. And I guess observation is data. If you're thinking I'm wandering away from data, we're talking about making observations and making decisions based on what we observe. So one thing we thought might be sensible was to think about where you can look for this sort of emotional data with the kids. And so we're a reading and writing project. So first off, it's in what the kids are writing. That's one place you'll see it. The topics they choose, the language they use, the tone they decide to take, and big changes in how they're behaving online. And you'll see that in like discussion posts and work of all kinds. Now let's see. Janet, I want to double check with you. Are people able to enter in the chat box already?
So people are entering in the chat box. One thing that I just want you guys to think about is some of you already know about the mood meter. One of the things that people have realized and research is starting to show that in order for kids to be successful in doing anything that you're asking them to do, you need to check into their social emotional. One way to do that is by having them fill out a survey about some of the ways they study at home, who's around. Do they have quiet? Is there 6 people in a group working on that same computer? Did they have a fight this morning? Are they in a good mood? Are they happy? You can look at the kids and see that. Of course, if you do a Zoom call, but you also want to check into just like what they feel like they're feeling. One of the things is that 82% of unsuccessful digital platforms are because the kids are not in the right mood or right mind frame, or the kids are not in a place where they can actually meet success. So the first thing to think about is a Google form, or think about a survey, Google survey, where you can do that work. It's really getting into the backup perspectives. Amber says, I do a Google form that has them select our daily greeting. Brilliant. I think you have to think about across the unit too. Like as you're working with the kids, half an hour in, what is their mood now? Has things changed? Has things not changed? Um, so the first part of data for us is not seeing how they read books, is not seeing what they're doing in writing, is not seeing like what they're talking about, is just finding out like, are they happy, are they ready to listen, are they in a place or a perspective or a habit of mind that that enables them to engage with what we're teaching.
Totally.
And then Paul, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, just the survey that David made, and there's a link to it up there. I copied this document so we don't have people interfering with this one. But on the other document that you have the bit.ly link, you can just grab that survey. It'll allow you to make a copy. And David, if you want to go over, you know, your thinking behind it.
Yeah.
I pulled it up and I'll make it a little bigger.
Oh, perfect. So as we were saying, there, you know, keeping your eyes on the kids when you're in a teleconference is one thing. Keeping an eye on their work when they're writing, their behavior patterns, you know, do they turn things in? Did they suddenly stop? All of that's information. This survey is an example of something that can be done really quickly and linked into your Google Classroom. And it's literally a 5 or 10 minute piece. It's a little bit influenced by Mark Brackett, but it's quite loose. So you can see I'm asking the kid's name, and a tiny gratitude thing. What are some things you're grateful for today? Just in case there's something to start with there. And what's on your mind? Just getting the kids the chance to share. And it gives the teacher, I think, a chance to share back. Then asking for a mood word. And then at the bottom, I think I asked for how the kid's energy is. Now, this little example is very, very quick to do. And once you've got it, the kids can click through. It doesn't require a lot of, they don't have to write essays. And then you get a sense of what's going on in the room. And if you're not used to Google Forms, all the information you get is collected in a Google Sheet, and you can see it at the end. Actually, you can see it live. So as it's coming in, you can see what's happening.
So Dave, one question, just to stop you, that some people are asking is,
Good.
Should we include this kind of work across a unit? Should we embedding it in all the TC units, or just do a daily check? I think one thing that's important is this should be both. It should be a daily check, but it also, you can use a survey form or a Google Classroom form within and without the units. Like Amber Coates says, in the 10 of 10 of reading, in the up the ladder fiction, this is a great form to use when you see like how they feel about reading each day, how they feel about their books, if they actually like their books or their characters. So I think it's in and without everything.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. And I don't know, I used to work with teenagers, and a great way to build engagement was to ask them to talk about themselves and to share a little bit of that with each other. So taking advantage of those natural impulses makes sense across the unit and day by day, I think.
A lot of our schools are sending out like a similar survey every morning, and then looking at the results and then connecting with kids that are in crisis. So I think that's also like a really good way to personalize your intervention or whatever by like taking a look at this. So I really think it's great for a daily check. We have someone that wanted some instructions on how to do this. So I'm gonna walk you through, everyone. So right here is the link that David made. It is unlike other links because it's gonna take you to a copy. It's gonna say make a copy. And so that means when you click that, that copy is yours. You can do whatever you want to it. It's not gonna mess up the master. As soon as you make a copy, I'll demonstrate, you click on it. And now you have that document. You can edit it by just clicking on any of these and adding questions. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, super easy.
Yeah, you can edit it. And then when you're ready to send it out, if you look right here where my cursor is, does everyone see that? It says send. You'll just click send, and then you'll probably want to send the link. It'll give you a link, and you can click this button, and it'll give you even a shortened link. And so you can just shoot that out via Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, whatever learning management system you're using every morning, and it'll populate, like David said, a spreadsheet on the other side.
Yeah, it might be worth saying, this is a quick example, and you can manipulate it however you like. One little thing that's probably worth thinking about is that if you send a survey like that out without a name requirement, you may get some information back that indicates a crisis but doesn't tell you where the crisis comes from. So if you're considering such things, you want to have a name attached, probably an email address too, just to make sure that the kid knows who they are.
One last thing to add before we go on to the next part is, as you're doing the survey, it's also a great exit ticket for students after you did some work with them, because one of the biggest questions we're asking now is among each other is, how do we know the kids are actually processing and doing the work we're teaching them or giving them? This is a great way to tap into what kids have transferred and what kids haven't. It doesn't always have to be for a mood meter. A mood meter is one avenue to use. This works through Seesaw. This works through Google Classroom. This works through any platform. I think the other thing is that you could do emojis for younger kids. There is a way to get emojis on this survey. I did it for a K-1-2 the other day classroom. You could do it through picture choice. There's multiple ways you could create this. It's also used with parents. So if you have parents working with kids, giving the kids one and the parents one to do, so that they're not always doing it together where the parents are telling them what to choose, but the kids are doing one and the parents are doing one. So you can see if the parents are actually engaged into the work. Mandy points out that you could also incorporate this into Zoom calls. There's a polling on the bottom of a Zoom call. And in the polling, it's almost like this kind of quick mood meter or survey where you can poll and ask questions right away.
Yeah, a lot of you guys are going to have your own favorite polling software, especially teachers of slightly older kids. So we recommend playing with that stuff, because at this time you get more information maybe than you have in a classroom where you can just sort of survey the class. Actually, I think I said the opposite of what I meant there.
With this said, then, one of the things that you also have to think about is perspective. And I think Paul's going to talk to us a lot about that. Correct?
Sure.
Go for it. All right.
Okay, so we're going to move on to this next section, and we're going to dig into this idea of learning dispositions. And I'm not really sure how familiar you are with that term, but there's lots of other terms for the same thing. You might hear mindset, you might see habits of mind, you might hear learner qualities, but they're all virtually the same thing. Growth mindset is just one sort of disposition, knowing that when I put effort forth, I can actually change my ultimate outcome. And that would be growth mindset being a disposition. What I really love is a researcher by the name of Guy Claxton out of the UK. It's a great book if you want to check it out. It's called The Learning Power Approach. He created this diagram to really kind of show us what's really, really important when we're thinking about teaching and learning. And if you look at the top part of the diagram, knowledge and skills and literacies, that's typically where we put all our emphasis. But it's really the attitudes and dispositions about learning that really need a lot of time. Because we might have the skill and be able to do something, but we might not have the disposition of perseverance to actually help us use trial and error to move and try things over and over and over again before I get success. So perseverance would be one example of a disposition. And without that disposition being developed, it's really hard to have success. So we're going to be digging into how to build a positive learner identity in our students. And you want to think about dispositions in the same way that you think about standards. You can really focus on a disposition and grow what that disposition means with your kids. And then eventually you can give kids feedback on these dispositions once they have clarity. So some key things to remember about dispositions, and then I'm going to let you reflect for a second, would be that, Art Costa has been doing this work for decades in our country, and he's actually a lot more popular in Australia and abroad than he is in our company. His work has really taken hold globally more than it has in our country. So these are the 16 dispositions that him and his colleagues have researched for decades. Some key things to know: that they're not fixed. So we don't use dispositions to label students, because labeling has a negative impact on their overall learning. But these are actually learned over time. We as adults and human beings typically learn them through struggle or challenge. So it's really important that kids are engaged in productive struggle and they don't get things always the first time, because it's through that struggle that we learn and grow these dispositions. And we really want kids to have clarity around these dispositions so that when they're in a challenging situation, they can think about, what disposition do I need right now to move through this? And so these dispositions support kids. I saw some folks in the chat room talking about IB programs. These are a part of all of the programs. Also, expeditionary learning schools have like learner qualities posted, and it's something. In our organization, we grow them with the school. We design a custom disposition profile based on the evidence that we gather. There's also disciplinary dispositions. So your standards for math practice and the science and engineering practices.
Excuse me, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can
Yep.
I just add that in reading and writing workshop, these dispositions are what kids need to do to gain independence across a unit. So some questions, just to stop you before you pass that,
Yeah, keep going.
or, like, what is this data for? A lot of us have been talking about our kids are not independent thinkers right now. And one of the things that we have to think about is, how do we get our kids to grow independence and to be able to struggle without wanting our help, especially in this digital pandemic world. So these dispositions are things that kids need to do in order to take risks and to be open to their learning. And it does, you're right, it is like a behavioral progression, and it follows the TC learning progressions and why they were created. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, definitely. And Janet's going to dig into the lifelong practices of a reader and writer in a moment, but all of these standards have dispositions built in now. And the reason why is they're disciplinary dispositions that kids need to be successful when being independent. So it really is, you can't have independence without having these dispositions developed. So we typically will pick a few to grow with our kids, and so that they understand them. What I'd like you to do for a minute is take a look at these 16 dispositions that you see here on the Google Doc, and what would be some that you'd like to develop. And I'll model first. Being a consultant and a big mouth, I like to talk a lot. So one disposition that I have to really work on is really listening and reframing what people say to me instead of jumping in and giving answers. So I like to really practice being a really reflective listener, where I reflect back what teachers and leaders are saying to me instead of always just getting answers. So that's like one that I'm trying to develop. And I really encourage you to be really vulnerable with your kids so they understand that these dispositions are contextualized. I might have perseverance in literacy, but not in math. And so how do I grow these dispositions across the content areas? So what are some dispositions that you'd like to develop? And we'll just wait until you answer a few in the chat box. So if you're, and maybe if you could say what disposition you'd like to develop and why in the chat room, that'd be awesome. You could also unhook your mute feature and you could say it out loud. Janet, is there a disposition you'd like to develop?
So I was thinking about all the conversations I'm having with so many of you, and there's two ones that really come to mind. Applying past knowledge to new situations, because we're in a new data situation in a new pandemic world, but it doesn't mean that all the stuff we have learned goes away. And so one of the things that I was thinking of was, how do we get our kids to transfer what they know to, you know, what they need to do? And then the second one was that our kids do not want to think independently. They want our help. And thinking independently, number 15, is one that is persistent across all the year. How do we get their kids to think independently? What do you guys think? Can I read some of them to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So
They're running in all over.
Yeah, now we're getting a lot.
So communicating with clarity and precision, Jemmy Rice says, creating, imagining, and innovating, managing impulsiveness, applying past knowledge to new situations, thinking and communicating with clarity and precision, creating, imagining, and innovating. A lot of people have creating, imagining, and innovating, and some want to find the humor. Some are the new technology and different platforms. How do you do the past knowledge to the present knowledge? There's quite a few of striving for accuracy. So Paul, it's like everybody took different ones. The four most important ones so far that I keep getting are applying past knowledge to new situations, taking responsible risks, applying humor, and thinking independently. And then the fifth one that's coming up a lot now is managing impulsiveness.
Very cool.
5 humans, yeah.
So we're going to dig a little deeper, and Janet, you're going to dig into how these apply to reading and writing. And so this is the diagram for the next generation standards.
So I was thinking about these different categories, and I was thinking of, first of all, the past information. And one of the things I was thinking about even before I got to the standards is thinking to myself, what have the kids already acquired? And as a teacher, we know by March, here's what the kids already knew, and here's what the kids were already struggling with, even going forward. And one of the things that I think about is, how are we going to break out what the kids already know? So as I'm looking at these next generation standards, these are also on the TEKS, they're on the new Georgia standards, the new Missouri standards, Florida standards, etc. Is these new ideas of lifelong practices of readers and writers. And I was thinking, if I'm going to apply past situations to what we're doing now, think, write, speak, and listen to understand. What are the things kids need to do to think, write, speak, and listen to understand? Well, to think, they need to know how to stop in a book and to make decisions. They need to know how to synthesize. They need to know how to match things, part to whole. To write, to speak, and listen to, they need to listen to what the author's really trying to say and what the characters are really trying to say. They need to be able to speak to, make themselves part of that book, part of that character. One of the things that I realize is, to get a lifelong practice of think, write, speak, and listen to understand, they have to be able to look at the past and what they learned and scaffold to what they're doing now in any type of text across any kind of content area. I was looking at this, and I also kind of thought about read for multiple purposes, including for learning and for pleasure. And one of the things I realize is, a lot of our kids are forgetting to read for pleasure. They're waiting for us to tell them why to read. So when I thought about this, and I thought about, like, independence, I started thinking about, how are our kids just creating goals for themselves to read for just to have fun? What kind of goals do they have, and what kind of habit of mind are they creating in order to do this? And how is that being addressed? self-select text based on interest. And I thought about how are our kids self-monitoring and creating their own independent lives. And I thought about in writing, write for multiple purposes, including for learning and for pleasure. They should be able to just write because they like to. Text messaging is writing. Facebook is writing. Our kids should know that there are multiple different digital resources and ways kids can become writers. And I'm wondering if sometimes they think they have to get a grade and they're not actually self-assessing to see what they need to do next. What is everybody else thinking? Paul, what are you thinking?
I was thinking like one way that I like kind of caught my attention once you were talking is one thing you could do is look at these lifelong practices and create some statements based on the things that you were saying. And kids could self-assess against those statements that you made. So you could literally turn this into a self-assessment, obviously not so much. Another thing I was thinking with these habits is they can be a part of goal setting. So even if they're setting reading and writing goals, they could also write about the sort of dispositions they would need to achieve their goal. Now, this would only happen after we build clarity around some of the dispositions, but once you build clarity around those concepts, you could certainly have kids write about their reading and writing goals and also the dispositions that they would need in order to be successful with those goals.
I think that's perfect because then they could hold it as a lifelong practice. Like
Yep.
someone here, as they were talking, was talking about the fact of analyzing mentor text to enhance writing and thinking about the goals kids set, but they never set goals with mentor text in mind. And how do they use the mentor text they already have to help them move forward? So thinking about like learning targets and goals for the kids right now, especially as we're moving through this, and how they're going to work independently is a brilliant way to get some data. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, maybe it's worth saying that one of the reasons why we brought these three big domains into the conversation is that this is maybe not a time to get into the details, the little, like sort of the icing on the cake. It's time to dig down and talk about the things that kids will need for their whole lives.
Yeah,
And you can see that with all this.
I think also because we're in crisis situation, we can't assume what's really going on at home. I know with our consultants, we just had a pretty lengthy conversation that we can't lay our own personal life on what might be happening at home. A lot of our kids don't have any adults at home supporting them with virtual teaching and learning because their parents are working and basically risking their lives. And that comes to bus drivers, food service workers, all the way up to healthcare workers. So I think not getting too caught up in the details right now makes a lot of sense, Dave, and paying more attention to their learning identity and if they're okay and that they're healthy is probably the most important way we could go.
Yeah. I mean, I think like in the beginning when we started with the mood meter and started thinking about the kids, definitely. One of the things though I think about is sometimes the kids can't express how they're feeling directly. So through reading or through writing, it is a way to get them to express, you know, where they are going and what and how they need to move forward. One of the things that it says in the lifelong practices is enriching personal language and background. I worked in the South Bronx, so just thinking about some of my kids in the South Bronx, we aren't even on computers yet, are in technology. So one of the beautiful things about this work also is checking into what they're doing right now and figuring out how you can help them emotionally and, you know, educationally. I think the other thing to think about with this work is what is the work of teaching inside these pandemic schools? And I agree with Ryan, thinking about our own mood meter and our own habits of mind and how are we being independent in doing some of this work and moving forward. So I think this is not only for the kids, and I'm reading some, some other people's work. I think this is also for us to realize that there are different people going through different things, and checking in when we do, if we're an administrator, because we have some administrators here, like what is, their situations, what is their problems. I think this is all valuable. And friend, knowing kids are safe, shelter, food, that's huge and important. Paul, how can we bring those things into lives if kids are not virtually doing this? Just because, like some of us, we are sending actual work home in plastic bags through shelters, through food banks. How would we be able to use some of this in that capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I can put together, like, because people have been asking for a resource package.
Hmm.
And so, like, there's going to be an exit slip at the end of this, and we'll be able to collect email addresses. But I think even if they're doing paper products and they're dealing off of like packets, because I know we deal with a lot of schools in Kansas, they don't have the computers at all. So the parents are coming and getting packets every 2 weeks. So I think that this work could live in paper. But I think like with the Frere model, if you put the learning disposition in the middle, kids would have to research what it is, what it isn't. They'd have to come up with some examples from their own life. So I can put together some things in a little care package that'll give you a little bit more information and some tools, especially for kids that might not have computers or a device, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's definitely. The other thing a lot of people are talking about is thinking about some of these habits with parents who don't have access to digital platforms and don't really know how to interact with digital platforms. And I think the beauty of the 10 to 14 different things that Paul showed us is making sure that we're checking in with parents too. And it might be doing a parent workshop, just asking, how's it going? Like, just let us help you. What's really frustrating you? Let's just hold their hand through digital world and say, like, let us take you through it. Like, parents are going through a lot too, which affect children learning as well. So I think there's 3 sets, and I agree with people as we're going through all 3 sets. 1 is the administration, 2 is the parents, 3 is definitely the students and the kids. The other thing that I'm looking at as I'm reading this is teachers calling students. And I think when teachers call students, you could still listen to kids and their tone of their voice. Do they sound flat? Are they sounding happy? Do they sound excited? The other day, a school, one of the teachers called a family, and this student was flat. Like everything he said was flat. Now, as the student's teacher, she knew that usually he's excited, he's all over the place, he's happy, he's never flat and depressed. And this teacher stepped back from asking him like questions about what he's doing in work, and she just found out what was going on with him. And what she did was then sent him to a place where they weren't getting as much food as they needed. And this poor kid was hungry. And this is an honest story. So she set him up with a place, a food bank, where he could bring food home for him and his family. The next day, today, she called him up, and it was a totally different ball game. All of a sudden, this kid was like happy, ready to talk, ready to engage. And I think this kind of work is huge if we're going to move our kids forward.
Yeah, I think another thing I want to add on is with our staff at the Core Collaborative, we do these check-ins 3 times a week, and they ask for more. They say that the time that we get together as a collaborative and like check in with our emotions and how we're feeling. Today, our director of professional learning had everyone bring a picture that was a memory that meant a lot to them. And all of us shared a favorite picture. And like we were getting to know each other in different ways that we never really thought we could. And it was with an artifact that we all. So I think
Such a great
as much
idea.
as the kids need it, I really feel like if there's leaders on board that have teachers, they need these check-ins too. So this sort of work is good for all of the adults because they're going through a lot right now, and parents trying to take care of their kids at home and teach virtually. And who knows what else is going on in terms of health. So I think that this is also really good for teachers.
The other thing that someone did, a project school did, which I thought was brilliant, was they created a blog, like a pseudo Facebook page for the kids, and the kids write to each other. They talk to each other about what's going on at home. They take pictures of some things that they saw outside. They kind of talk to each other and give each other advice on how to react to the kids, how to react to each other. And I thought like that kind of like video page is just brilliant for the kids and for the teachers to check in. And it might be you could do it with teachers too.
Cool. So do we want to move to this next piece?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So now basically what we're doing is we've kind of started kind of broad and thinking about what's other kinds of data, especially during a crisis, that's vital for educators to get so they can be responsive to their learners. And Dave went to that. Then we talked about this idea of dispositions, like a 30,000 foot view, that there's these dispositions that are needed when we're in challenging situations to create more independence. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually unpack one together. And this is something that you could do. You could even give an exemplar of an unpacked disposition. You could use a Frere model. But Dave, Janet, and I are kind of going to just do this together. And I was a visible learning consultant coach for about 5 years. And so obviously everything that we did was around the evidence. So one thing when teaching and learning, the objectives are really important to be crystal clear. We can more than double the speed of learning when we're clear about what concepts we're teaching. The other reason why we unpack dispositions is so we can give feedback to kids. So if you look at the effect size here, it's really high. So anything above 0.4 is extremely high in teaching and learning. So we're almost at 0.8 here. So that's almost doubling the speed of learning by having clarity and so that we can give feedback. So what we're going to do is we're going to model how to unpack a disposition. So we pick perseverance. It lives in the math standards, it lives in the literacy standards, and also lives in the science standards now. So this would be a really great one to unpack with your kids because it lives across all content areas and also lives in life. So one thing that we do is we think about a person in your life or yourself and a time that you really persevered and had to move through a really challenging situation. Janet and Dave, what were some of the things that you were thinking during that time?
Yeah, Dave.
I was going to say, go ahead, Janet. I'm such a lit guy. Right away, I think of the little engine that could. So maybe I can, is what I was thinking.
Oh, so I can?
Yeah, that's what the little engine thought. I think I can.
Okay. What would be some other things that would be running through your head?
I always thought like I wonder, because sometimes it's not I can, but I wonder. Or I will, I will do this. One of the things in the Georgia standards is I'm determined. So it's not an I, it's an I am determined to do blank.
What about I have before?
And
Once
then
in a while, I've persevered in the past.
Courtney writes, I can blank by blank. I love that, Courtney. Yeah, that's perfect. What else do people think?
I also think it's important to be super vulnerable and not just only model the positive things that someone thinks when they persevere, because being completely real, I think I can't a lot.
Yeah,
and
that's
there might
exactly
be
what
a
they say.
lot of other things that run through my mind that I can't say out loud. But when I'm persevering and dealing with something that I'm really struggling, a lot of times I have a lot of doubt. And I have to talk myself off of a ledge sometimes. And sometimes I need a break.
So Paul, what some people are saying is, and I agree with them, is that it's not I can't, but I can't yet, and yet in capital letters.
There we go.
Yeah.
I don't think I usually say the yet, but
Okay.
I'll add it because I believe in yet.
Yeah. And they're all quoting Sesame Street.
There you go.
Yeah. Some of them are saying, this is hard. This is hard, but I can try. Or this is hard, but I'll try this in 2 weeks, or, give a time frame. This is hard now, but maybe I could try it in.
Right. And then obviously, if we move on to saying, obviously it looks like some of these are exactly the same. So we might want to change this. Let's just change it to feeling.
Yeah.
I was going to say, are we allowed to change the form in the middle?
Yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Wow.
So what are the feelings that you might go through, or a learner might go through when they're persevering? I see someone put anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety and worried.
Capable, failure, pressure, frustration. I feel excited sometimes. Or I feel like mysterious, like it's the mystery of it. Some people say motivated, competitiveness. Oh, I like that. Relieved when done. Yeah. Or strong.
I like that too.
Strong, tenacious feeling. Energized. I love energized. Exhilarating. Deflated. Sometimes you do feel deflated. Or powerful.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I think the key here is to have the wide range of emotions, so when kids are in a struggling situation, that they know that it's okay that I'm anxious. It's okay that I'm worried. Those are normal feelings. There's nothing wrong with me. I can still be successful, but I need to welcome those emotions in and then figure out how to deal with them. So I think what I love about these examples that we all brainstorm together is that they're a wide range, and we're not just pretending that things are always like we're holding hands and things are perfect, that learning is emotional and it's not always positive.
Then
right?
Can I just add one thing to that? Sometimes you start out like really kind of worried and feeling deflated, and then all of a sudden, as you struggle, that feeling changes, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So not always to back off when you see a kid is like stressing, see what you can do to help him deal with that stress and push on.
Yeah. We're gonna teach story arc here in a minute.
Yeah.
A character arc,
So should we just finish this up and do a couple more ideas in terms of like doing? So like, what would a learner be doing who was persevering?
So some people said planning or trying.
For sure.
Planning, trying, approximating, goal-driven, engaged, creating a schedule or setting next steps.
There are some pretty motivated types in our chat room.
Multiple attempts, drafting, definitely drafting, trial and error, taking a break when needed.
Trial and never is a really cool idea.
Attempting, or coming back to it, taking a break and coming back, or starting over.
Yeah.
So you get the picture. So this is one way that you can start to build clarity around dispositions. And I would typically look across your standards to look for dispositions that live across all content areas, because then you can work on the transfer side. Another way to do this, in the care package that I'll send, Art Costa and Ben Akalik have this cool website that parents and kids can go to, and it teaches you about all the dispositions. It gives you a little video that explains it and some guiding questions. Another great way to build clarity is just through storytelling. Like, so in your modeled writing or in your stories that you're telling to kids, telling stories about your own life and when you had to activate a disposition or be unbelievably vulnerable, and you'll be able to talk about what dispositions you wished you had used during that time that you didn't really have access to.
I just want to add two things and then ask you a question. First question is, can you put the link of that website on the chat box for people, Paul?
I can't right now because it'll take me a while to find it, but I will send it out in the exits. When we do the exit slip, I'll have everyone's email address because it'll take me a bit to look for it.
Also, another thing is that every day we do believe are at the end of a unit in reflections and goal setting. That kind of helps you see some of the dispositions, and having kids do grows and goals across the week. Like, what did I grow in, and now what are my goals going to be? So you could see where they are and what they're reaching towards. Because I don't think we have to wait till the end of something or the beginning of something. I think we could do it across as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important too.
Yeah. So I know that, we've done a lot, and before we end, can we, one thing I want us to think about is, can we name two things that we think we're going to try right now, and then we're just going to say goodbye because I know our time is totally going to be up soon. And do you have any other questions that you want us to answer right now? If you could write those in the chat box. Also, can you include your email and your name in your chat box if you want some of this other supplies, or his goodie bag, I call it. Yeah.
So right here, I put the Google link. So everyone has the exit slip, or you can just, since you have access to the Google Doc, just click on this and it'll take you to the Google link. And then that way we'll be able to get your information, your name, school, district, grade, or course. I don't think I added the email address on that. So just add it to your name. And I'm going to actually, once we get off, I'm going to change the Google survey. Janet, do we have a way to email everyone that registered for this?
We do, because I've been taking names and emails as we've been going along, copying and pasting it. So we have that. There's also, if you don't get anything from us and you want something, I know mostly everybody on this, you can email Janet at readingandwritingproject.com, and I can send your email and share it with Paul and with Dave, and we can send stuff through that. Or on Facebook, I'll put something up as a follow-up to this on the Reading and Writing Project Facebook, the reading one. And we can follow up through that. So we have a couple of different ways.
Yeah, and I also added the email address to the survey right now, and I'm going to put the survey link in there again. So if you fill out the exit slip, then we'll be sure that we have your email address, and then we can email you the care package.
All right, so we're going to end right now. I love everybody's questions. And some people asked, are we going to do this again? Is this a new partnership? People are texting me on my telephone asking me how we could do this again. They don't want to put their names in the chat box. We could do this again. We could think of a time, and definitely the three of us can follow up on this and do this again for you. If you need anything, or you have further questions or further insight, just email me, or I'm going to put my email here, and I'll make sure I share it with everybody, so that we could go over it and we could help you. And anything you need, we're there with you, because we also understand that your lives are crazy right now, and we just want to help.
Just to say, we've all got kids going through school, friends going through all of this stuff with you. So absolutely all the respect in the world to the work you guys are doing out there.
Yeah, and I also put the Google link in there again to get to this document. On this document has all 3 of our email addresses. If you just, it'll send an email, and then all the links for everything that we did today will be in that doc, in that bit.ly link. So you should be able to get everything, including the exit slip link.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Night.
Bye. Good night. Good night. Sleep well. Be safe.